Yes, and welcome to Vasily's Garden, folks. How are we? Out in the little private garden here, a little courtyard that we've got a few fruit trees, advanced fruit trees. I'm looking at a dwarf apple tree which really stands about 1 and a bit metres tall, not quite 1.5, and it's been producing pretty well, but I'm working on its upright growth, which, as we've spoken in the past, this should have been taken out at the end of summer. So this is what you get once the tree starts to ripen its fruit. It puts on its summer growth, and most of that is to create a canopy over the top of the fruit so they don't get scorched by the sun. And when you harvest your fruit, you generally should be cutting that back down in summer too, but it's never too late. And what I'm going to do now is just demonstrate how to cut it back so that we don't get as much upright growth. And if you want to know what I mean by that, is if we refer to this tree here that I've been using as a testing ground. I've been cutting this one back over the last 4 to 5 years, not 45, and bringing it right down, so I haven't pruned this at all. And if you notice it, there's got very little growth on it. In fact, that's probably the biggest growth, and a couple over there on those branches there that need to be cut back. So the technique that I've been using on this to cut it back and cause it to become a fruit-bearing spur, because that's what these are, rather than putting on growth. This is what we're referring to as fruit-bearing spurs. These here will produce fruit off the end of these every year if they don't dry out on us, and really get very little growth out of that, any vigour out of it, like this one here. So for example here, this is one that I want to stop growing, and what I'm going to do is going to cut it back to a couple of buds from the base. So we've got 1, 2 and a couple down there, 3. So what we do is actually cut it back instead of, let me get this and do a close demonstration. I'll just cut it off here. Have a look at this. So imagine this is still connected to the actual tree, right? And we've got alternating buds, inside, outside, going all the way up to the end, and there's the new growth coming along. Now, what we want to do is stop this vigour coming through every year. So wherever we cut it back, we don't want it to bounce back out again and causing it to grow a new shoot. What we do, and normally if you want to do that, we always say, if you want to get new growth out of it, just cut to the outward facing bud. For this one, for example, this is the outward facing bud. We'd cut just above it like that on a slight angle, and that way come springtime, summer, that will grow out to become a new shoot. But if we want this bud here, for argument's sake, to become a flowering fruit spur, or to develop into that, what we do is an undercut. Now the undercut is referring to the bud above, and what we do is do a horizontal cut directly underneath it, as far away from the bud that we want to activate. That triggers an enzyme in the tree to cause that to flower and become a fruiting spur, eventually to become that. And that part there basically dies. So what we have in layman's terms is sap going up, nowhere to go, coming back down, pushing this little bud to germinate or become a blossom rather than a leaf and a shoot. And from there we start getting fruit, because the whole purpose of plants is to reproduce. And by doing that, you're tricking the plant into thinking there's dieback going on, because that will eventually die. And that way it'll flower from there and become a fruiting bud rather than a shoot. Otherwise, if you want it to grow out, you just cut it off at the right angle, at the same angle, let me cut it cleanly, as the bud itself, and come spring, summer, that will sprout out to become a new shoot. Now that is what we've got to do to this plant. We want to trigger it to become one of these. For example, we've done a cut back here. There is a bud forming there, and there's one really high up there, but rather than going back up here, let's keep it short. This one's died back. Let's just clean that off. We don't want that. What we're going to do is try and push these ones here. So we're going to cut, well, we can cut there, that's too close. We're going to cut to this bud here, undercut there, and that's an outward facing bud anyway, so we hopefully can activate that. Now that is the same thing that I'm going to do along this whole plant. I don't want to encourage new vigour, so by cutting now I'm probably going to do that, but again, summertime we'll make sure we cut it back this time. And I'll give you an example of what I mean by that. So I probably cut this back last winter, and I did an undercut there, and you can see that little bud there, it hasn't burst, but this hasn't died back either. Let's just make sure it hasn't died back. See, it's quite quite green still. So we haven't really triggered that one off, but instead we've triggered this side and we've got it sprouting up on both ends there. So now we've got 1, 2, 3 to work with. We can remove one completely, or we might just do an undercut again like that and work to an outward facing bud and do, there's a bud just there, so we're just gonna have to cut really close like that. So we've got 1, 2, 3 going on there. This will probably work better in summertime after it's put on its summer growth. Now, every tree will grow at different points of the growing season. So some will start shooting off their summer growth as early as November, December. Others will start in January and even February. And it depends on the ripening cycle of the fruit as well. So you'll find a lot of apples will ripen from January, February, all the way through till April, May, June, very late, some very late ones. But what we're looking for here is doing our summer prune as late as possible after the summer growth, so that we have knocked the vigor out of the tree. Because if you find your summer growth has come on and then you've gone immediately 3 weeks after it's put on its summer growth and start pruning, the tree hasn't slowed down. You're actually activating more vigor into the tree whilst it's still finishing off its original growth, and therefore you're going to end up triggering more growth again after you've pruned. So it's always best, depending on when you harvest, like your Granny Smiths are very late, May and June. That's really late to be pruning your tree back, but you can prune it a bit earlier after the summer growth has settled down. So monitor it. You'll notice it straight away, like this has put on a lot of growth from last year's prune. Let it sit there for a month. If it's a tree that you're harvesting fruit off already, wait 3 or 4 weeks after it's finished ripening its fruit and then go around and give it its summer prune. Now, you can go around and do it the way I said, or you can simply just go down and knock it back down to a certain height. But if you're going to knock it back down to a certain height, let's pay a bit of attention and say, you know what, I don't want any more summer growth here. 1, 2 buds, maybe 3. And if it's on the outside, the second bud like I've got down here, and we want that to become a flowering or fruiting spur here to trigger it, we're going to do an undercut from the top bud, which is up there, close to it. And that way we have that die back and we're triggering that little bud to become an active flowering fruiting bud for ourselves. And we're going to do this all the way along. Look here, I've done die back, I've caused die back, it hasn't triggered. It is not 100% perfect science, folks. It will work most times, sometimes it doesn't. I've cut that off. We've got a bit of growth in here, we'll work with that. It's up here, the bud, the outside bud, and there's one just there. So I'm going to pick and cut back up here and trigger that one off because we've got plenty of space down there. But we have got fruiting spurs developing here, if not already fruiting. And you can see again, we've got die back, I've done the cut back there, we've got fruiting spur coming on there all along. Let's clean this up and let's have a look at it at the end. I want to show you something else as well. Got to be careful when you cut back, so don't cut back too close to where you want it to become a fruiting spur. For example, here we've had these 2 or 3 all at the same length at one stage. I cut that back too short and that's died back right down to the middle, which is a no-no. You don't want that happening. You want that to be clean, and these here haven't triggered off yet, so that was cut too close to the bud, and rather than becoming a fruiting spur, it's shot up again. And the same thing here. That was cut too close to the bud and it's shot up again, so we're not getting any fruit off that. So we've got to clean this up. First and more importantly is cut that out, but look at that, it's already died inside this. So this branch here is going to be useless long term. I've got to remove it here for starters. It's clean, yes. Now we've got that spur there, which is potentially going to become a fruiting one for us. You can see it started to thicken up. There's also that one there, but we've got this little bit of, we may be able to work that, but you know what? Let's just get rid of that completely and work with that. Now that's only one bud that I've left there. In fact, no, it's 2. We're lucky there's another one there. Why I say that is because you want to trigger, you don't want it to die back too close to the base, because if it bypasses that, you'll end up killing the branch where it started from, as you saw earlier, and then the following year you'll be removing the entire part back down to the next level. So try and do it undercut, at least 2 buds away from where it starts there. And as you can see, this is what I'm doing now. I'm cutting back and trying to trigger the spurs or the flowers that become fruiting spurs for me. And the pruning that I'm doing now, folks, should have been done in summer for me. The summer prune should have been done. Now you're probably saying, well, why are you doing it now? isn't it defeating the purpose? No, it isn't in fact. I still need to do the prune, and hopefully I will trigger enough of these little short stubs that I leave behind to become fruiting spurs or develop some fruiting spurs on them. Otherwise, if I just do a normal cut as we spoke earlier, like this, just above the bud, then I'm guaranteeing myself to have a hell of a lot of new growth come springtime. So I'm going to avoid that regardless of what time I'm doing it. And I'm going to remind you that in summertime, you've got to prune your trees as well, just like I have to. There we are, folks. So we brought it right down. Now there is a lot of congestion going on in it, this one here. And something about pruning, well, one thing about pruning fruit trees like this, folks, especially when there are a lot of branches, you've got to go through and thin out the weaker ones as well. So there are a fair amount of weak ones. You can see that that's quite weak there, especially the tips on here. So realistically, I should remove that completely, but because it's not interfering with something else, see, I found another excuse to keep it, because it's not interfering. I'm going to work with that for now. But if you have got branches that are actually touching each other, and I have actually gone through here, and there really isn't anything that's touching one or the other here. There's one there, for example. See that there? That's nothing. That's a very poor example, but that is one that's touching, for example. You can cut that right off there if you like. Down here as well. So we've got the curve coming up, and I like that curve because that's where I'm going to get a lot of fruit from. And this one here, the weeping branches, these lateral branches are where you get your fruit from. But look, it was touching before. I think it was just caught up in it like that. But I've separated, so they're free from each other. They're free. But at the end of the day, if you're thinking there's way too many branches on here, yeah, okay, okay. But it was touching, there you go. Right? So someone spotted it. That was leaning on that one there. So for example, that there, let's just get it off, done. No shame in taking some of the branches off. Fewer fruit, better quality, rather than too many fruit and poor quality. And again, that one's sitting over the top. Probably just remove that completely. There really isn't, it's a poor spur. Cut it back to there if you want, cut it back further. It can sprout up from there as well, but that's a small cluster there that will have some fruit on, and we can go around the rest of it like that. There's a lot going on in here, but that's okay for now, because nothing's touching anything, and I'm happy with that. It's my tree, that's how I want to prune it. Anyway, check out our website, vasilisgarden.com. Don't forget to book yourself our fruit, not our fruit tree, because I think we've sold out of that by now, but you can check it out. If there are any seats available, please, by all means, book yourself a spot so you can come down and enjoy a great day with Craig Castry, demonstrating grafting techniques as well as what I've just done here. We're going to go through real time and do some pruning. Otherwise, our Get Ready for Spring workshops are on, folks. We've got 5 different sessions going on, and they are feeling pretty quick. So if you want to come down, book yourself a spot at vasilisgarden.com and enjoy the specials we have with the coupon code word 30 off. From me, Vasili, Maresi.